Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast, the show for women who are seeking more fulfillment in life and simply not getting it from their current situation. We focus specifically on careers, but hey, we spend a lot of time in our careers, so making changes here will definitely create an impact in your overall happiness. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and my mission is to empower women to succeed. I believe that in order to powerfully own your career, you must decide and claim that you want to sit in the driver's seat. You must know that you deserve better and be willing to not only do the requisite work, but be willing to go out on a limb to ensure your success. Each episode focuses on profiling a leader who is clearly demonstrating ownership of their career. Join me and my guests as we explore career journeys and bring you actionable strategies to use to get into the driver's seat for your career. Because ultimately, your career is your responsibility. Let's get into the show. It means so much to me that the podcast is growing in terms of the number of downloads, growing in terms of the number of countries that are listening to the podcast, and the people that are expressing interest in the programming and events that I do. So I want to bring to your attention just some information on how you can work with me. I have a career breakthrough program that is starting in October, and it's essentially 90 days focused on your career. An amazing opportunity to really roll up your sleeves and get into a mastermind sort of conversation about how to move forward with your career. The other opportunity to work with me is in the form of career coaching, one-on-one career coaching. And I would love to be your career coach and to really get you feeling responsible for your career journey and taking the actions that you need to get what it is you want for yourself in your career. So if you're interested in either option, please head over to www.careerbreakthroughcall.com. That's www.careerbreakthroughcall.com. I look forward to connecting with you and to learning more. And so please take advantage of that opportunity. And I look forward to learning more about your career story. Without further ado, let's get right over to this week's episode of the podcast. Thank you so much. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm super excited that Mary O'Sullivan is joining us this week. Mary is a leadership coach, an entrepreneur, a teacher, and so much more, and someone whom I call a friend. And I want to welcome her to the podcast. Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Simone. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Awesome. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you're currently doing?
Right. So who I am right now at this moment in time is I am a leadership and executive coach. I also do training for leaders. I also am a SHRM SCP. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's a Society of Human Resource Management senior certified professional. And it was a long journey for me to get there. And one of the things that I like to highlight about my career and my background is that for 30 years before I became a coach, I worked in large industries. I worked in Fortune 100 companies, and I was not in HR or coaching or anything related to that. I worked in the business. I worked in business development, and I worked in subcontract management. And so there were a lot of years that I spent as an employee experiencing things that happen in big companies that are often to my advantage and my ability to relate to clients. But also when I'm working with a client, I can give them the perspective of a really big company. So if they're having trouble, let's say getting along in a small partnership, one partner does all the work, the other two like to surf or stay home with their children, and this partner is just burning himself out doing all the work. My suggestion to him was to have a conversation about alignment And that's not always a concept that's used on the small business level, but I thought it would be really effective for him to introduce that concept to his partners and basically sit them down and say, we are not aligned as a team. Because when you work for a really big company and your boss calls you in, the last words you ever want to hear is you are not aligned. And that means that you've somehow gone off the path. So I love to use that concept to help people understand where their disconnects are. And I've also done that with individual clients that are either having trouble on the job, especially senior people, because it's easy to lose perspective at that level, or if they're having issues with coworkers or subordinates, and one of them is out of line. That's another way of saying it. And so what I suggest to people is that they try to talk in terms of alignment, because that's something everybody understands. So after all those years, I'm able to pull into my present all the things that I learned from 30 years of the past.
Wonderful. So today you're an entrepreneur, Mary. How long have you been in business for yourself?
I've been working for myself for 6 years. When I left my last big corporate job, they were very generous. I requested a voluntary layoff, and they gave it to me because I was just ready to go. And part of that nice package was money for further education and also executive coaching. So I spent some time with the executive coaches, and more than one of them thought that would be a good fourth career for me, actually. And so I took the money and I applied it towards my tuition. I went to a university. It was a university program, a graduate program in executive and professional coaching. And I finished that up in 2015. But I actually started working as a coach before that. Because I entered the school in 2014, and part of our learning was to go out into the world and coach whomever would be agreeable to coach. So I did a lot of that. We also did a lot of peer coaching. So I've been coaching people, senior people, manager level and above, since 2014.
Wonderful. So could you tell us what is your formula for successfully owning your career? What's worked well for you?
So it's really about not giving up and not getting discouraged. I will say that one of the things I was able to do during my career previously was that I knew somebody. Each time I made a career move, I got help. And nowadays it seems like nobody wants to ask for help, but you can't really move forward unless you get some help. In my coaching career, I was a little bit lost. I didn't really know where to get that kind of support. So I just did as much as I possibly could to make connections, to join professional organizations, and to just get people to know me better so that I would get the support and help that I needed. And at this point, I'm getting a lot of requests for me to come in and speak to companies, or people that I had been in class with want to meet with me just to discuss how their business is going and what they need to do to work change management projects. So it's really a matter of driving your own career forward and getting as well known as you possibly can. Recently, I've definitely gotten some support. Yes, I had to pay people, but for the work they did for me, I was 3 times blessed, because I was able to get into 5 different newspapers, a prominent business newspaper, a magazine, and I had a number of different articles published in not only local magazines, but also in Thrive Global.
So, Mary, if I could ask you, what was a signifier for you to know that you were in the driver's seat, essentially taking ownership for your career?
Right. And it's not that easy, to be honest with you, because you don't have the big support system that you would have if you work for a big corporation. So to really get in the driver's seat, you have to be completely confident in what you do. And the best advice I could give people is that you are good at what you do. It's a matter of getting everybody else to also embrace that. And that's completely up to you. So you have to take control of your image. You have to take control of all the digital media that can help you. You have to take control of your brand. The branding is just so ultimately important, and it has to reflect who you are and what you do. So I wanted to project a very professional, very kind of corporate image, and I worked with some people to help me develop that. And I didn't get any help doing that. I was in complete control over that entire marketing sort of blitz, I guess. That when I first started out, the marketing blitz was one of the most important things, and I've gotten a lot of results from those things. So to be in the driver's seat, first of all, you have to know where you're going. And that's difficult when you first start out as any entrepreneur. And then you have to be able to get some support to get there and not be afraid to ask questions, ask for help, get whatever kind of support and knowledge from other people that you can get.
I think that's well said. Oftentimes I hear people really struggling and in pain, but not wanting to invest in their development. And what I have found as a small business owner as well is that you really have to invest in your development, certainly where there are gaps and you're not skilled in those areas. It really is helpful to invest. You see it as an investment in your own growth.
Absolutely. And I think some people fail because they're not willing to make that investment. And being an entrepreneur, truly, especially a one-person show, can get very expensive. And so while you may be able to do a lot of things yourself, there are probably things that are taking up a lot of your time, which are not in your core competency. So this is what I had to do. I knew that list creating and list maintenance was not my core competency, that coaching and teaching and doing research was my core competency. So I had to learn to delegate out those things which did not serve me and did not move me forward, and focus on the things that I was really good at that would bring people's interest to me, and that would give me the proper exposure that I needed in order for people to understand how they could benefit from working with me.
I love that. And it's not just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, but also if you're in a corporate environment, you still need to take the same sort of steps to really invest in yourself and build your personal brand and get people to know what you're able to do, the value that you bring to the table as you consider your career trajectory.
Right. That's exactly right. And I would say in that sense, what I recommend to my clients and when I do speaking engagements is that if you work for a big company, you're really lucky because big companies have money to spend on training. And so you need to look at what they will offer you. I got half of my master's degree paid for by my company. I became a Six Sigma specialist paid for by my company. I have a list of certifications that I received as a result of working for a really big company. And when I left, I used that tuition stipend that they gave me to get my ICF PCC. And, it wasn't inexpensive to get that. And yeah, they gave me about a quarter of the tuition, but yet it was something. It was a contribution towards my ultimate professional development. And big companies want to spend money on professional development because they don't want their employees to get behind the eight ball. They want them to be on the high side of the development curve, not behind the curve, but in front of that curve. And that's really, really critical. What I like to tell people is that don't fret about what may happen. Take what's good about your past and try to repeat that in the future. So what you were good at maybe 5 years ago, you still have that ability to do it again. And if your company offered you a master's degree, you know how great that felt. So find out what else they're going to offer you and take complete advantage of it. I don't care how small the certification is. You walk away with a professional certification that's generic. It works on every level. It's not specific to that particular company. And the learning that goes on there is applicable to furthering your career, even as an entrepreneur, because you need those skills. You need all of those skills when you strike out on your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that is a good segue to talk about risk and how you have embraced risk to move forward in your career. Can you talk about the messaging that you use? What do you tell yourself in terms of embracing risk as a part of your career strategy?
Well, I think anything that you really want to accomplish in life has risk associated with it. One of the things when I left my company, took the voluntary layoff, they weren't going to give it to me at first because our department was very shorthanded. So I called up the 1-over-1 manager, and I was really rolling the dice because I didn't know what her reaction would be. But she was the one who pushed that paperwork forward. If I hadn't asked her, I never would have gotten all those benefits from the voluntary layoff. So that's one way to embrace risk. But I think a lot about the dollars that I'm spending on things to keep my business afloat. And every dollar that goes out for a new computer or office space or a standing desk or marketing support or placing an ad or any of that, you can't do that stuff without the thought that there's some risk taking involved. And unfortunately, we all learn about risk the hard way, because you can take a risk on something that looks really great to you, but you don't get anything out of it, not even one phone call. So you have to decide what is the thing that is going to bring you the highest rate of return, because you don't want to be slipping and falling and running out of money because you haven't planned your risks properly. So there's risk in everything that you do, especially when you do it for the very first time. Absolutely. The biggest risk in being an entrepreneur is really understanding the expenses. And my advice to keep your spouse happy, at least, is to make sure you're tracking all your expenses and all of your revenue, so that, if you're making $10,000 in a month and you're spending $9,000 because you had to, fly across the country to take an excellent course that's going to bring you more money, that is going to come out of your income, and it looks like it's a risk. But if you can manage that risk is going to pay off, and use all those tools that you learned, you reduce the risk of your business eventually failing. And that, and every entrepreneur has the fear of failing.
Yes, absolutely. What resources, Mary, have you found to be helpful to you in taking ownership of your career?
Well, the most important resource in taking control for me has always been people. So my advice is don't ever burn any bridges, because you never know who can help you in the future. It might sound a little bit political, but try to develop your political savvy, understand who can help you, and work with those people to get the help that you need. So, as I said earlier, every job I ever got when I was working for the Fortune 100 companies, I got because I already knew somebody. And now the clients that I see in my business get to know me through either face-to-face, personal interaction. Maybe we sit down for a coffee or have lunch. Maybe they just drop by my office for a conversation. And also through the people that I met through networking that can help me get my message out and get my branding out. And since I did that and I relied on those people to help me, my business has really increased. So you have to learn who can help you and who's going to waste your time. And sometimes that takes a while, but I always go now, I've learned, I go by personal recommendation. And when I see somebody's work and I know they're good, that's when I'm going to hop on.
So Mary, can you think about a time in your career, if there is one, that you avoided responsibility and what you did to overcome that?
That's a hard question, because I cannot think of a time when I avoided taking responsibility, because my very first career was a school teacher. So you can't be successful at school teaching unless you have complete responsibility for the munchkins in your class. So what did I know?
Absolutely. Well, sometimes people ask for clarification, and what I really meant was just not being in control of your career path, so letting someone else dictate your career journey.
Well, there was one time when I left business development and went into subcontract management because I thought I wanted to do something different. And so that was a little bit of a bumpy career path, because I didn't know anything about subcontract management, and I really had to learn quickly on the job, which I did, but it was kind of painful because I spent a lot of hours working at things that other people just, figured out right away. I did not have a finance background, and a lot of those people in my group did have a finance background, or else they were really good at using IT, and it was a very technology heavy position, and I wasn't prepared for that. And the number of things that we had to do ourselves, which I was used to having somebody else do, like help me with typing and paperwork and filing, and also getting some help with, if the copier jammed up. Like, I didn't want to be the person unjamming the copier, but when I was in a much larger department with more people, there wasn't much choice there. I had to figure out how to do it. So in that way, I kind of wish I stayed on the business development path. However, I learned a lot about contract management in that job, and I did get certified. So as crazy as working pretty much independently. You're pretty much like a solopreneur in that job. I still was able to get a lot out of that position. And I was, greatly rewarded by my company for taking the initiative to do those things. But as far as not stepping up, I think in every case, I can't think of one case where I didn't do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that part of your journey. As we wrap up, I want to say thank you so much for being a guest. Can you tell our listeners how to connect with you?
Absolutely. You can go to my website. It's www.encoreexecutivecoaching.com, or you can email me directly at mary@encoreexecutivecoaching.com.
Thank you, Mary. Really appreciate all the wonderful nuggets that you have shared with our listeners. And again, thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. It is my hope that you enjoyed today's episode. You can check out the show notes for this episode on the SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org website by clicking the podcast menu. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and tell a friend or two about it.